Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on time for our session today on strengthening coordination for emergency preparedness for response, food and nutrition sector consultation. I will take a few minutes here to test the mics of all the panelists and the moderator present here. Please unmute yourself and say hello.
Hello.
Yes, hello.
Hi, this is
Hello. Anil Sinha here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Good morning. This is Bishu Parajuli from World Food Program.
Thank you, sir.
Uh,
Vikrant, sir. All right, we will begin shortly.
Good morning.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Yeah.
I'm from Delhi. I'm Deputy Director working in Integrated Child Development Scheme of Delhi government. Hello to everybody.
Thank you, ma'am. Once again, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our food and nutrition sector consultation on strengthening coordination for emergency preparedness for response. I will now hand this over to Mr. Vikrant Mahajan, CEO, Sphere India, to welcome and introduce all of our panelists today. Vikrant, sir, over to you.
आए हैं, भेजो हमारे पास। हाँ, ले आए हो? एक मिनट।
कहाँ से बैठूं? अच्छा, ये अभी मैंने अनम्यूट
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Paritosh Mure, and I'm the Advocacy Manager here at Sphere India. On behalf of Mr. Vikrant Mahajan, who's facing a slight technical issue, I welcome all of you in this August gathering to discuss food and nutrition security sector in India. I hand over the discussion to Mr. Anil Kumar Sinhaji, who has graciously offered to moderate the session for today. Mr. Sinha, I hand it over.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I didn't get your name.
Mr. Sinha, this was Paritosh here from Sphere India.
Okay. Yeah, Paritoshi, morning. Thank you so much. So namaste and good morning to everyone. Of course, one is missing Vikrant, but I'm sure he'll join very soon. See, we on behalf of Sphere India, let me welcome everyone to this session today, which we have on the food and nutrition sector consultation, is strengthening coordination for emergency preparedness for response food and nutrition security sector. I just read it, to underscore and emphasize the importance of the words, key words, which we have. That is strengthening coordination for emergency preparedness, for response, and for this food and nutrition sector. This is the third in consultation, third one in consultation. We have had 2 consultations on education and WASH, and today we are taking this food and nutrition sector. Why I emphasize this whole business of coordination, because many times I think we, in the discussion, you see the speakers and the panelists, we are more around the content of the subject. But I think the whole objective of this exercise, current exercise, 6 consultations which are being held back to back on every day this week, is focused on is strengthening this whole business of coordination. You see, we know that any disaster situation, and more so the bigger disasters, the major events, are multi-stakeholder, multi-player, multi-actors, multi-agencies, be it at the national level, state level, or the district level, or even international levels, you see. And therefore, it calls for great deal of coordination to optimize the efforts, the energy, all that time, energy, resources which go into it, you see. And therefore, I'm just reminding everyone that let us focus on this whole business of coordination. Having been in this business of public administration for the last 30, 40 years, I am personally acutely aware of the importance of this word coordination, you see. I suppose if I may not be wrong if I say that in the government documents, perhaps if you look for one word which is most used, then it will be coordination. And yet it is not fully understood, less understood, and even practically least practiced, you see. And there are, various difficulties, practical difficulties, and that is what we are here to address, you see. Now, if we look at the importance of coordination, if we are able to coordinate, then it optimizes the performance. That is one straight away benefit. If we are not able to coordinate, then you see there are lots of disconnects, there are lots of gaps, and therefore there is, on the whole, there is underperformance by various agencies. Some agency may even overperform because they step into the area of another, they step on the shoes of another area, see. And therefore, in this kind of a situation, communication, you see, understanding each other, having a shared language, you see, and developing and understanding a framework of engagement with each other, becomes very, very crucial, you see. Where there is clarity of key objectives, there is We know about the targets, sector-wise, player-wise targets which have to be achieved within a certain time frame. If that is there, then we see that the whole team, and by team I mean all the multiple stakeholders, we work more and more in harmony, and naturally more the harmony, better the results would be there, you see. uh, I need not emphasize the importance of data and information management in this kind of situation. Project management tools and templates, you see, which are used, they must be known to everyone, must be understood by everyone, you see. Now, given this background, if we look at the food and nutrition sector, then of all the six sectors which we are discussing, we discussed education, we discussed wars, today is this, then we have protection and others. I would say that food and nutrition sector is the most demanding, and it is the most challenging. While each sector has a challenge, but then this one is most demanding, most challenging. You see, first of all, food and nutrition sector, the requirements, they get compromised in any disaster situation. In many places, they are compromised as it is, but they get further acutely compromised in the disaster situation. And therefore, the first thing requirement is to understand the magnitude of the problem, understand what are the FNS needs are there in terms of ability to purchase, to grow, to gather or receive food or generate income. Understand the levels of insecurity. We are talking security, and therefore we must understand what are the levels of insecurity in the affected population. And let us be clear that not everyone or the whole population has the same level of insecurity, you see. So I think that is very, very important. Understanding levels of malnutrition, the causes, etc. Understanding the whole matrix of vulnerable population in terms of who faces the highest risk and what kind of intervention for what period would be required, you see, and how to implement whatever measures are there, whether government schemes or other interventions are there, how to implement, you see, that is very, very important. This requires assessments, food security assessment, nutrition assessment, agriculture livelihood assessment. Then there are cross-cutting issues like gender, other challenged population, etc., etc. Now, we have several schemes of the government, of course. Public distribution system is there, midday meal is there, ICDS is there, is there. And these have to be seen more in the context of their implementation at the Panchayati Raj level, I would say, district onwards. I keep emphasizing on the district, and I'll be speaking a bit more on the district, now and a little later on, you see. Because that is the level where the disasters happen. That is the level where predominantly the response also happens, you see. Because the state government or the central government, they only supplement. And therefore, that is the importance of the district level institution, be it DDMAs or be it, whatever, including Panchayati Raj institution, urban local bodies, village formations, etc., etc., you see. Now, in this kind of a situation, you see, livelihood and livestock, that is also one sector, one subsector which I am highlighting, because that also becomes very, very important in these situations. And then emergency response, how do we transition from emergency response post any disaster to early recovery? And how does early recovery connect to mid-term and long-term recovery is very, very important. And one of the things which we should not miss and which is the key to management is the early warning systems, you see. And especially in food and nutrition sector, I think that is very important, though it is important for everywhere. Now, I'll just end by highlighting the number of stakeholders, number of players, which are involved in this sector. And just look at the list, we have Ministry of Consumer Affairs, we have Ministry of Food and Public Distribution. I'm talking of the national level, and most of these have corresponding formations at the state and the district level. Then third, Ministry of Agriculture and Farmer Welfare, including animal husbandry. Then Ministry of Women and Child Development. Then Ministry of Rural Development, also for livelihoods, you see. Then Health and Family Welfare. Then Drinking Water and Sanitation. They are all, enveloped in this whole business of food and nutrition security. Then Education. Then Social Justice and Empowerment. Then Food Corporation of India at the national level, Then NGOs, INGOs, UN organizations, private sector, civil society organizations, then food supply chains, etc., etc. This comes to something like 15, 16, stakeholders, and perhaps there would be more. For we can be sure that there will be more and not less than this. In this kind of a situation, it's very important to understand each other's role and develop a good, detailed, understandable, shareable coordination matrix. You see. Having said this, let me once again say that I think we'll have to emphasize a bit more on the, and of course, resource mobilization is a thing which I have not mentioned, but that should never be lost sight of. That I think we should focus our discussions more at the state level, which is where things sort of emanate in terms of the action, and then the district level where everything is implemented. You see. So with these words, I hope I have given a brief overview of the whole situation and and the extent of the problem. Let me. Let me now, I'm happy that Mr. Vishnu Paranjuli, Country Director to India of World Food Program, is here. So may I now request Mr. Vishnu Paranjuli to give his opening remarks on global FNS response to COVID-19. But Mr. Patanjali, may I also request you to kindly introduce yourself in terms of your country and a little bit of your experience. That is my curiosity. Thank you so much and welcome and namaste. Over to you.
Good morning, Mr. Anil Sinha, and also all other distinguished participants. It's really an honor for me to join this August gathering and share some thoughts. I think you have very well highlighted the value of coordination, the value of preparedness, and I will go one step further to say that better coordination, better preparedness saves lots of lives, can save lives, and also save lots of money and resources. And it's very evident broadly. I don't know how much time I will have, but personally, I'm here in India for last 1 year. I used to be UN resident coordinator and UNDP resident representative in Myanmar and Zimbabwe. I've been with the United Nations World Food Program in several countries. This is my 11th country, India. So I've been heart of coordinating humanitarian responses in major emergencies like Cyclone Nargis, which happened in Myanmar and in Mozambique and in Zimbabwe and Yemen. And I've been forefront in coordination, but at the same time, championing issue of food and nutrition. So delighted to come and join you here and share some thoughts. First of all, I want to really congratulate and compliment Spear for taking this initiative because it's important and well recognized that civil society play a very important role in coordinated responses. And it was very evident recently when we had these lockdown and beginning of COVID, millions of meals served, hot meals, and as well as food to the needy people and the most vulnerable people. Principally, the role of civil society in this is really fundamental, and we strongly believe in that. In the broader context of coordination, preparedness, UN system has adopted a bit systematic approach. The point Mr. Anil Sinha just mentioned, we have like 11 or so clusters set up, and each of these clusters and cluster lead, which are part of the United Nations funds program and agency, take a lead, and they have a role to play in bringing all other partners, civil society, other UN agencies, to maximize the responses. The fundamental philosophy behind this structure approach of coordination is making sure that various humanitarian needs are met, and at the same time, no one is left behind. In a chaos of emergency, there is a possibility that disabled people, vulnerable people, children, etc., can miss this because the loudest one gets the benefit and gets the help and etc. And also there are elements of common platform which are needed. For example, logistics, warehouses, year deliveries, and transport, all these aspects. The huge element of protection need for girls and women. When you have a chaos, there are chances that these vulnerable population get exploited. So it's very important to ensure that they are protected and their needs are also made, including when there is a situation of crisis. Sometimes lots of infrastructures are destroyed as well. So the IT system, communication is really fundamental. It's also organized. So there is, various elements. And then also the important point in this approach is assessing the basic needs. What is the need in food, logistics, education, health? It's not one component. So therefore, looking at in a divided responsibility on the various aspects of the need, and then bringing collectively the emergency requirement. So as you rightly pointed out, the life-saving element, the first, of course, several weeks, and then also moving towards early recovery and reconstruction. These are part of the overall need. And I think we have an evident situation in India in the last 6-7 months, for example. We can take the issue of COVID, we can take the issue of cyclone or floods we have witnessed. I must say that the structure is very strong in India. Salute to the administration, strong administrative mechanism, and also institutions. Unfortunately, in many countries, you cannot say the same things. And now coming to the COVID, all that unforeseen event happened because of COVID and lockdown. This immediate setup of the empower groups and how to best respond to that various need with 10, 11 empower groups, including cooperation with civil society and UN bodies, the private sector, and etc. Was a very, very positive step. And then, of course, also the preparedness to adjust to the situation and respond as moving forward. Because a lot of time there are uncertainties when these things happen all of a sudden. So it was commendable and correcting. We from the World Food Program, we are very much closely working with the Empower Group 5, the food and logistics supply chain. And I was personally involved with my colleagues for daily reporting of updates for 2 months. And I witnessed that, the constant changes and adjustment and improving. How do we improve things? And that responsiveness to the reality on the ground is a very positive state, including we can remember the announcement from the Prime Minister and Finance Minister packages, and at the same time, additional food requirement extended now until November. And also at the state level, I mean, there were challenges. For example, as much as there were these excellent safety net measures, such as the TPDS, the midday meals, and ICDS, as was just referred, but they themselves had challenges because the schools were closed, the children didn't get the meal, they needed it. Similarly, there were these red zones and etc., and they were not able to, people were to move to deliver support. So there were mechanisms developed to reach out and support that adaptation, and including the sudden movement of migrant laborer and people getting hungry, and volunteer civil societies joining hand with the government to cook meals, serve meals, and recognizing and appreciating that was a commendable example. And then followed by that, also we remember there was this cyclone in Odisha. The state government of Odisha evacuated 1 million people, and so these are fantastic examples I think we have in India in terms of learning. I'm not saying they're all perfect. Maybe there are room to improve and work on. So obviously, in the context of COVID, we have seen the problem of food and hunger, right? The hunger issues. India, in the global picture of hunger, like 690 million people not able to afford meal, is quite a significant number also live in India, in spite of, and that's why the government has these various responses to address the challenges. In spite of all that, they were evident about people losing jobs and obviously getting to that group of population who need help and etc. And then the issue is the assessing, monitoring situation, looking at the continued element of vulnerability and see how do we help to respond to that. The ground situation, the civil society really can play an immense role. I mean, SPEAR alone with 200 NGOs across the country can play an immensely positive role. The initiative now government has taken, the EPOS, the ration card you have in Bihar and you are in Odisha or Kerala, you can collect the food rations from there. But is it working? It's not working. These observations and any challenges at the individual level can be facilitated by civil society. There are, other segment of the population, such as sex worker, HIV, AIDS, impatients, etc., needing food supports and etc. So for those, maybe reaching out and finding a way with the local administration to help is an important element. Now, few things to sum it up going forward. Obviously, the COVID has put an enormous challenge to the economy globally. We have seen it in India itself, and obviously that impacts job, that impacts livelihood, that impacts access to food and nutrition. So given already the vulnerable situation existing in the past, this adds to the further burden in India as well as globally. And WFP is estimating the chronic hunger rising from to a double, like 270 million globally in 2021. And countries where there has been a higher level of dependence or concern are suffering even more. Like, for example, Southern Africa region, addition to the COVID, there is the drought, and in somewhere in Central Africa, in the Sahel, there are also other concerns like civil strife and conflicts. Middle East, you can see the whole Syria, Libya, Iraq, and Yemen is becoming one of the major catastrophic situation in terms of vulnerability on the population. So you have a huge concern from a food and nutrition point of view, given this situation of COVID. But of course, united, added element of shared responsibility. Of course, we can meet these challenges, and we must. And India can play a very important role in the context of this, expanding these, helping hand and meet that. India has been blessed with really increase in agricultural production, with 291 million tons of food and 75 million tons in stocks. So this is a fantastic gift we have with the blessing of the green revolution and big efforts and right policies and program and etc. And also globally, other countries can also learn the value of these safety net program India has, where billion people are being provided access to various support, be it midday meal, be it take-home ration or other things. And I'm also glad to see increasing recognition of the role of civil societies by the government and Niti Aayog. I think that is really important. So probably going forward, what is critical is continued monitoring of the vulnerability and concern, and civil society playing collectively a role to help understand what's happening and giving that feedback to the authorities and facilitating that connecting between the ground reality and the point. The second issue is, I would say, really watching the most vulnerable communities and making sure that they get the support they need, children, women, and other things.
Mr. Bishop, may I request you to kindly conclude? Yeah.
I am finishing in half a minute. It's about to end. And then making sure that no one is left behind. And finally, working towards a resilient food system going forward. And making sure that where the vulnerability lies and working to support that. Okay, that ends my presentation and short message. Thank you very much, and back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop Patanjali. Wonderful. I think with your very rich experience in India as well as many countries and across the world, you are a veteran, if I may say, and you have seen coordination at play, in various countries, in various settings, and so thank you so much, for highlighting some very important aspects of this whole situation relating to food and nutrition security, and especially in the context of COVID-19, which has really challenged the systems and the countries and the governments, all over the world, as much as it has done in India, you see. And I think you also pointed out the cases of concurrent disasters and overlapping disasters, compound disasters, which we have been having while we have been facing the COVID-19 situation. We have also had cyclones, we have also had floods, and we have also had some industrial disasters, etc. We have had a big issue in our country of migrant labor because of the lockdown, and which led to various issues of hunger and nutrition challenges, etc., etc. But I think I'm very happy that you highlighted the importance of shared responsibilities, a framework, and shared language in terms of improving the coordination. So thank you, Mr. Bisho, once again. Namaskar. Thank you so much. We'll be in touch. It's been really wonderful hearing you and about your experiences. I'm sure this sphere, as a collective, can gain a lot by discussion with you, with your wisdom, with your experiences, and learn a lot of lessons. So thank you so much. Yeah. Now,
Thank you very much.
thank you. Namaskar. May I now go to though the keynote address is scheduled for General Bindal, but I'm told our friend, Joint Secretary, Mr. S. Jagannathan, who is Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution. Obviously, Joint Secretaries are on the firing line. So he has, some other commitments. So he will be giving presidential address on the role of PDS, Public Distribution System. Mr. Bisho also talked about a one nation and one ration card kind of a concept and the mega project which is being pursued in our country. So may I now invite Shri S. Jagannathan, Joint Secretary. Sir, the floor is yours. Jagannathan, please.
Good morning to all of you. I am S. Jagannathan, Joint Secretary. It's a pleasure to be part of this discussion forum. In fact, the timing is absolutely perfect just when we are getting into our act of supplying food grains all over the country in India. So my talking point is about PDS and the role of PDS in the emergency situation. As you all know, India is a big country and the PDS covers nearly 800 million people. And we fortunately have a very robust end-to-end supply chain structure with the Food Corporation and the state agencies continuously engaged in the process of procurement, storage, movement, and distribution of food grains all over the country. Just to put the whole thing in perspective, annually we commit or supply something like 60 million tons to the population under the PDS from the central subsidy operations. Now, especially in the context of the COVID that happened at the end of March, what happened was we were in a tight spot to supply more food grains, as you all know, with the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana and then subsequently the Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme, where the migrants had to be given a lot of assistance in terms of food grains. So since April till November, we have virtually ensured the supply or tied up the supply of nearly 64 million tons of food grains. So that gives you an idea of the scale of operations. Because in the whole year, normally we are used to supplying around 60 million tons. In these 8 months itself, we have outdone ourselves by supplying much more than what we do normally in a year. Now, coming back to the emergency supply, as Bisho rightly mentioned, there was lockdown everywhere, and then in the movement of people, the infrastructure, the transport, everything was hamstrung. So how did we do it? We obviously didn't do it alone. We did it with the cooperation of our logistical partners, mainly the railways, who moved nearly 170 lakh tons during this period, and it is still continuing. Then we tied up with states through our empowered groups on support on logistics and economy and welfare. And what we did was we put in place a very robust MIS system, MIS information gathering system on a daily basis. And a review is being still undertaken to monitor the supply of food grains all over the country, so that we keep an eye on where the weaknesses are and where the strengths are, so that we learn and then tell specific states to pull up their performance. So in this manner, we have been sustaining the supply chain with the support of the FCI and state agencies. Then it also has given us a good lesson in terms of when all the markets are closed, and even the banks were closed and people didn't have access to even cash and money. So in such a situation, we have clearly realized that an institutionalized structure of PDS and supply chain is the only refuge for us to fall back upon, to ensure that the most basic requirement of the people, that is food security during testing times, is ensured through a robust supply chain system like the PDS. And we have been very eminently able to ensure with a lot of success. And there has not been a single complaint from any part of the country about supply chain operations or the PDS. This has been possible again through the network of nearly 5.4 lakh, 540,000 PDS shops. And we were able to gather the data of distribution through the automated shops, which are about 480,000 in number. So that has made the entire system very robust in terms of management, monitoring, and then ensuring correct supply chain operations. Then coming back to the other aspect of emergency operation, which is Atmanirbhar, where the migrants were in transit all over the country. So this is one area which we were not exposed to earlier, because we had to reach out to the migrants. Again, we activated our supply chain and state machineries in all the 36 states and UTs to reach out to these migrants. And this is where we had even actively sought the support of civil society organizations, the NGOs, who are already engaged in support to migrants and other marginalized groups, to reach out to these people and also to help them in their own way, through their own resources and mechanisms, to help the state authorities to identify these people wherever they were put up in relief camps or shelters or community kitchens that were set up, to ensure that nearly 2.7 crore migrants were helped with food benefits, free food grain distribution during this period from May to August. So this was a very successful operation. What this has proved to all of us is that with active collaboration and efficient operations, we can really rediscover ourselves in terms of our capacity to respond to increased demands during emergencies like these. And it has given us a new hope of rebuilding our organizational structures and understanding our weaknesses, and then strengthening areas where we can do even better, to ensure that in a time of crisis like this, where nothing else works, an institutionalized structure of supply, direct supply to the people for most basic a commodity like food, is absolutely essential. And there is no better setting to prove this than the Indian setting, where the PDS, as you know, has been there as an institution for the last more than 60 years. And it has been evolving over a period of time. And now with this newfound confidence, we are on course to even better our performance. Like for instance, through portability of PDS operations, which is already operational in about 28 states, covering nearly 85% of the PDS population, who are empowered to go somewhere else and seamlessly access the PDS benefits. Now, without taking much more time, I would like to conclude my keynote address by saying that the collaboration with other stakeholders, not just the state governments and the public sector agencies, but also with other stakeholders like the NGOs and other think tanks, would probably bring in an era of public-private partnership in ensuring a sustainable food security ecosystem in our country. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Jagannathan. I think, as I said, you have been in the hot seat, you see, during these last 6, 7, 8 months time when we have faced the COVID-19 crisis, and which was accentuated by this whole issue of migrant labor, which was not really expected. And this was kind of a scenario which the government or the administration had never really faced. But you highlighted the importance of having a robust structure, which was also mentioned by Mr. Bisho, that if you have an infrastructure which is robust, which is time tested, it can rise to the situation. It would have been much better if we had anticipated these issues as the COVID situation and the scenario unfolded and the lockdowns were imposed. But while that was important, but there were costs to be paid. But I think between April to November, the quantum of food grains, which have been distributed by your ministry under your charge, through lakhs of PDS, all across the country, and maintaining the whole supply chain. You see, I think is something remarkable. I must say, that is to say the least. And I'm sure now we are much better in control of the situation. And lastly, I think you very rightly pointed out and highlighted the importance of public-private partnership, you see. And that is what we have also been talking, private, not just in the sense of private sector or the corporate sector, but private also in the sense of the larger civil society, the NGOs, the community-based organizations, the INGOs, etc., etc. So thank you so much, you see, for informing us and describing various steps which have been taken by Government of India, especially your ministry in coordination with the state governments, with the district administration all over the country. You see. So thank you so much. It's been wonderful hearing you. Yeah. May I now request General Manoj Kumar Bindal, who is the Executive Director of National Institute of Disaster Management. I think, General Bindal, your support has been very, very crucial to this sphere exercise. And you have been participating practically every day in these discussions and benefit, given we are having the benefit of your guidance, your advice. So may I now request you, General Bindal, to kindly speak on the objectives of multi-stakeholder, multi-sector coordination. So the floor is yours, General Bindal, please. And will someone from SPR ensure that the speaker's video is right in the middle, please?
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm really thankful to you that you are sparing so much of valuable time for the series of multi-sectoral coordination, which are so very important. Each one of them is important in its own way. Today we have heard three good talks, one by you, sir, and one by Mr. Vishwajit Paranjali, country director of WFP, and Sri S. Jagannathan, Joint Secretary, who's dealing with the subject. And all of them have given us such a good perspective that it finally tells you that the problem is in coordination, or problem is more in coordination rather than the supply. Because we have seen that the PDS system in the country is a very robust system, and that is how the masses are being reached, the persons below poverty line are being reached. Where we need to work on is that there's a need to identify the gaps in the present system, for which World Food Program and an IDM has collaborated together and signed a MOU, where we will be studying the food and nutrition needs uh, on a regional basis, and come out with a solution as to what should be the nutritional need during disasters for any region, keeping the demography of the population in place, in mind. And also the needs of the people. Every religion, every caste, every demography, different types of demographies have different needs. So trying to, and they have their own traditional foods, traditional way of eating. Uh, so the whole program, this needs and gaps, when we are going to analyze, is going to ensure that the traditional ways of the communities is always at the center of it, so that we are no way going to alter the traditional way of thinking, because traditional way of thinking have they have survived for so long, and that is what they are used to. And we will suggest ways and means to make it a better way, so that it is easily acceptable at that level. What we need to understand is, with the PDS system already available, there is no requirement of devising a new method of distribution or coordination. We need to build on it. We need to build on it. And the major problem that we have seen is the inability of the machinery to absorb the additional players at the time of crisis, as well as additional material and items in the times of crisis. Because of short staffing, they're already hard worked, and regular meetings on such issues do not take place at local levels, where the actual the food grains and food supplies are going to arrive by trucks. I remember in uh, Bhuj earthquake, uh, suddenly, after about 4 to 5 days time, we had about more than 200 trucks standing on the outskirts of Bhuj town, waiting for command, and there was no one to give them the command. And when the administration got into uh, action, they were given places to go, where again it was up to the local population, because there was no coordination as to where will they be loaded, where they will be stopped, who will unload them, who will control them. So it was directly given to the various shelter camps that were established all over the uh, state, and these trucks went directly to them and started delivering. And thereafter, for next few days, the trucks by themselves started going to these places and started delivering to them on their own. So that coordination is very important. And by the 10th day, there was abundance of food. There was abundance of food, that the food stuff that was arriving, especially the cooked food stuff, was rotting in the places, because there was no one, no takers. People had geared themselves up. So the change in the type of relief, type of response is also very important, which will change with the progress of the disaster or post-disaster phase. With every passing day, there will be a change, because things will start getting back into shape. So to have the same response as it is required on the first 72 hours for the next 20 days will be a wrong opinion. So that is where this main multi-sectoral coordination can come into play in a very big way. And it has to be done with IT, which was brought about uh, by the speaker before me. Uh, that this machinery to absorb, and it should be IT enabled, as well as regular meetings between the NGOs, civil society organizations, and the government machinery needs to be done. We must understand that in India, we are talking about India in this particular case, in particular, there is no shortage of food grains. In 2014 floods of Srinagar, when Srinagar town and surrounding areas were submerged, uh, the whole country was clamoring to send food grains to the state. uh, Thousands of trucks were lined up in various states, but they were all stopped, because within the state itself, there was so much of food grains stocked in the various FCI, the Food Corporation of India and Central Warehousing Corporation godowns, that it only required a coordination at some level to move them from one place, from the nearest godown to the affected area. And that is what was done. In one odd cases where the road was cut off from both the ends, like Palampur area and Pimpore area, there the food grain had to be supplied through air because I was in charge of the relief operations there. But so coordination is the main issue in this whole thing. Next point is, in India, all the disasters, I'm not talking about pandemic as of now, all the disasters are regional in nature, even though they cover a very large area, which may be equal to many countries in the world. However, the resilience within the country is quite a lot. That is why we never accept food grains as a uh, relief material, because there is enough of it in the surrounding areas from where it needs to be moved into that area. But what needs to be moved, in how much quantity it needs to be moved, is the moot question, for which this particular project by WFP and NITM is going to give answers to, try to find answers to, in which Ms. Pradanya Padnekar is also a part of the whole project with us. And we will see how it goes on in the whole thing. The one major issue which is plaguing the nation even today is the poverty issue. The poverty issue and food and nutrition during emergency response get connected because the people who are below the poverty line, they do not have the resilience. They need to be provided food at the earliest. And hence, identification of such people, knowing their locations, is required, and hence the IT enabled system is a very much important requirement, with accurate census data of all people living in that in any particular area, so that right support can reach the right people in the right amount in the shortest possible time, and the food and nutrition security needs are met. So the objective of the whole multi-sectoral coordination is to ensure that there is no commodity which is being wasted by oversupply. There is no commodity which is being left out and is creating a nutritional shortage, and the right amount of quantity of each item is supplied to anyone who needs to be supplied to. And it's a coordinated effort, and not that every agency is left to themselves to look for an area to distribute and go and help those needy people. So I think with this, I will finish my few points which I had. Thank you so much, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, General Bindal. I think again, with your very rich experience, army background, and then your background in disaster situations like Bhuj, gives you a lot of clarity and insight into the issues which are there and the priorities, which must be there to take care of these situations. You see, you also, I think, right in the beginning, you highlighted a very critical point, that is the traditional ways of the society, the traditional ways of the community. We must not really interfere, because that comes out of age-old wisdom, you see, and therefore we must build on that. We must have ways and means to make it better. We must utilize science and technology and the latest innovations to make that happen better, rather than interfering and tinkering with that. I think that's a great point, that we must build on the existing system. And talking of coordination, that reminded me of what you talked about, Bhuj, was the similar experience I had in the super cyclone in Odisha, and also Bhuj earthquake in 2001. See, I also have very clearly in my mind, hundreds of trucks outside Kalinga Stadium in Bhubaneswar, or this Jubilee Park in Bhuj, you see, where somehow or the other we could not really coordinate initially, and the kind of the underperformance which I was talking of, the overall efforts or the wastage. Say you talked of rotten food, etc., etc. Because whole country starts responding There is an ad hoc, spontaneous, emotional kind of a response, which is very good in a way. But to the extent we are not able to plan and coordinate it, then I think it leads to the wastage and of resources, you see. So therefore, I think that is very important. And lastly, your point about the linkage between poverty and the food and nutrition security, the fact that the people at the margin, do not have resilience, and therefore it is important to map them. In fact, this mapping should not be undertaken after the disaster has taken place. The basic mapping, the benchmark mapping should exist from before, and on that we should start working in a disaster situation. And that only will ensure, as you said very rightly, and I like to repeat your words, right items to the right people in right amount and in the right quantity, in the right time. I think that is the mool mantra, which will ensure that the coordination is really successful. So that is the touchstone. So thank you, General Bindal. I think thank you so much. Every time I hear you, I think you really bring together a lot of foresights and insights, from your rich experience. So thank you
Thank
so
you, sir.
much. May I now invite, we missed Vikrant in the beginning, and he is the pilot. He is the driver of this whole exercise as the CEO of Sphere India. So it's important to hear him, his vision, which is driving the whole thing. So Vikrant, may I now request you to kindly make your remarks, give us your guidance, share your vision. So Vikrant, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much, sir. Firstly, thanks a lot for ably moderating this session and hearing all the speakers. I think vision is already set, for what we need to move forward. I'll share more about not the repeating about the issues, but what is it the exercise we are trying to do and what we want to achieve out of it with the help of everybody. I think in some words, it has already been reiterated by all the speakers, including yourself, the Joint Secretary, General Bindal, and the Bishu. I think what we see in India, I think is as already shared, is a food surplus country with a very robust supply chain mechanism. That also what was the Joint Secretary also emphasizing on. But still, we see there is hunger and malnutrition. We have many pockets in the country. There are more than 100 blocks where the hunger and malnutrition levels are very serious, at a serious concern level. And the relationship which they have with the disasters. I think we earlier with NDMA, when Dr. Muzaffar Ahmad was a member NDMA, we did an exercise of mapping the disasters impact as well as a pre-existing nutrition levels in India, and we find a very strong correlations that how the disasters are the cause of entering into a vicious cycle, that the instead of being a food surplus and such a strong programming going on to the PDS and other social security means, people continue to be in that vicious cycle of falling back into the issues of food security and malnutrition. I'm sure our speakers ahead in the panel discussion are going to highlight more onto it. What we see in the COVID context is also the way the entire migrant population, they firstly moved back to their places of origin and now going back. Is this double movement is having its impact on the nutrition and the food supplies. I think whatever was some of the existing coping mechanism put into place, they were not challenged a lot because of the COVID situation and this migration movement happening. But the a very forward-looking programming like now, one nation, one ration card on the anvil, is largely going to address many of the issues related to that. With all these things, our effort actually started pre-disaster, pre-COVID. There's been thinking coming up from the distillation of our experiences of our last many years of disasters, not only in India but also in the worldwide experiences through the cluster coordination, other mechanisms. We're trying to see that how the coordination between different stakeholders and the different actors could be better, not just during the disaster but before disasters also, so that we can address the issues better in during disaster times. And the food and nutrition supply chains, food and nutrition, the affordability, access, affordability, and supply chain don't get impacted during the disasters. In other words, we build up a resilient, food supply and a food distribution mechanism among them. So with this thing in the mind, we looked at the global good practices. We look at the our own Indian country, very local and a local context level. What has been some of the good things happening, and a team coming from some of very experienced organizations and professionals. Some of them who are speaking today in the next panel discussion has pulled out this information and put it together into a draft of a guideline which can facilitate, which can help achieve better coordination for food and nutrition during the emergencies. So the draft of this guideline is now out, and for consultation, we are inviting inputs on the draft. And I request all of you, apart from the panelists, I think to all the participants, there are series of consultation going beyond this the webinar at the community level, at a state level, being organized by the team. And once we get the inputs on this draft, then we will come up with the next version of this draft, which may go for another set of consultation may happen onto that towards the end for the final closure of it. And then, as Major General Bindal has been very supportive of thinking, and that we will use this guideline, to convert into some kind of training modules also, so that the capacities on improving the coordination on various sectors, especially food and nutrition, can be incorporated. And in true sense, I think it's all about putting up the collaboration, which Joint Secretary was saying about putting up something like public-private partnership. And sorry, I think I keep coming back to the word people. It's public-private partnership, but with the people at the center of it, or we will call it a public-private people's partnership we put into place. That's what the way forward. I think with this, I will end my words, and I'll hand it back to Sina sir with a request to all, please participate and give your inputs to this draft. I think it's going to be one of the major milestone in improving the coordination, not only inter-sector but also intra-sector coordination, which is one of our main aim of this exercise. Thanks again. Thank you, sir. Over to you, Ben, sir. Sina, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Vikrant. Once again, very clear. I think very brilliant kind of a presentation of your thoughts and the roadmap, which is where India is going to follow. I would like to highlight the point you made right in the beginning as to how in 100 blocks or maybe more than that, the levels of poverty, they are related to the undernourishment, malnutrition. That leads to disasters by itself. One doesn't have to really wait for some kind of a natural event like flood, cyclone, or something else to happen. The linkage between disaster, malnutrition, poverty, etc. I think that is at the core of the whole thing. Those are the people who are most vulnerable, and they are caught into a web of disaster situation. They live on the edge of the whole situation, and every small event pushes them more and more towards the edge, and they become more and more vulnerable. You see, and the migrant population, in and out, they went back to their homes, and now the economy requires, the industries require, whichever sector they were working, it's important that the economy comes back on the rails, and therefore there is a return flow of these migrants. And this has definitely created a new kind of challenge, for our country. But I think there are things like very ambitious uh, programs like, One Nation, One Ration Card, which will really help in people moving from one place to another seamlessly, kind of, and still availing of the safety net schemes provided by the government, you see. And that will also make the whole food supply chain, more and more resilient. And people also resilient in terms of their capacities, because wherever they are, if they are assured of a certain minimum supply and the right quantity, right kind, at the right time, of food. I think that is very, very crucial, you see. Uh, and the last point is very good, that public-private partnership should be seen with people at the center. Yes, certainly. I think that's a very good focus, which you have given. So thank you, Vikrant, for your wonderful, very sharp points, very insightful points. Let me at this stage, before we move further, just highlight two things, two thoughts which have come to my mind. Is that one is that, right from first day I have been saying that the district level is the most crucial, you see. That is the level where things happen. That is the level where everything is implemented. Any government program, any government directive, it has got to be implemented, and that is how it really succeeds, you see. Because till the implementation doesn't happen, it remains in the files, in the air, kind of, you see. Therefore, the district disaster management authorities are most crucial. Now, the Disaster Management Act 2005, passed by the Parliament, has talked about the DDMAs, its powers and functions and responsibilities in detail. Actually, 10 sections, section 25 to 34, are devoted to DDMAs, you see. And yet we find that, the DDMAs are not able to really cope with the situations. Let me tell you, I'm sure all of you also have the feedback, because we have not attended to looking at the structure of the DDMS. What kind of human resource should be there? What kind of skill should be there? What kind of other resources should be there in the DDMS, so that they are able to perform all the functions and undertake all the responsibilities left. Therefore, may I mention that at some stage, if we could deliberate and think of, creating as a part of to function, because a lot of them, even though some kind of a training is given in the National Academy, etc., etc., I think let us work on this. The second point, which I like to say, which underscores everything, we talk of gender many times, but I think the just talking of gender is not enough. We must escalate it to the point where we are really talking of women leadership. How do we develop women leadership? How do we nurture women leadership? There are a lot of states which have now reservations in the panchayats for women, but that is one major step. I think we have to go several steps ahead, that in these kinds of things, especially say for food and nutrition sector, though it is important in every sector, but this sector, I think women leadership in any program of the government, at the panchayat level, at the village level, is most crucial. So let us also underscore and work on this point, as we move ahead. With that, we are coming to the close of the inaugural session. I was told by Ilya that there is one question relating to use of ICT tools, you see, for ensuring both food and nutrition for the marginalized section in the remote cut-off areas of population, particularly in the COVID pandemic context, you see. I would say one should look at it not just in the COVID context, but in general context also. So I don't know if someone who is the expert in ICT would like to answer this. Otherwise, I think, we should move to the panel discussion, and I'm sure in the panel discussion, we have many experts and they would like to address this question. So may I now hand over to Paritosh to kindly take the deliberations ahead in the panel discussion. Paritosh, please.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha, for that very brilliant moderation. I think we got to hear from a lot of experts across different levels of their expertise. We've had Bisho speak about his international experience. We've had Mr. Jagannathan speak about the quantum of work undertaken by the Department of Food and Public Distribution. Mr. Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal spoke about the role of Army and his experience from responding to J&K floods. And while Vikrant Mahajan has been speaking upon the importance of coordination, Mr. Sinha, you've also elaborated a lot more on your experience as the Vice Chairman of Bihar State Disaster Management Authority. And I think we've had a brilliant time listening to the inaugural panel. Moving forward, we have an equally distinguished panel ahead of us to discuss a bit more on multi-sector coordination. Among the panelists, we have Mr. Anand Kumar, Anand Kumar Singh. Anand Kumar Singh ji is the Deputy Director General of the Horticultural Science, additional charge of crop science from 2017 till date. Prior to this, he had made contributions to several organizations in the field of research, be it in Tata Energy Research Institute, in IVR, Division of Fruit and Horticulture Technology. He has also served organizations such as National Horticulture Board, National Oil Seeds and Vegetable Oils Development Board, Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. He has exemplary expertise in research areas of tissue culture and mango breeding. Mr. Anil Singh, it is our pleasure to invite you as a panelist for this particular discussion. I will hand over to Mr. Anand Singh ji as he will expand a bit more on the technological progress that could be required to ensure disaster risk resilience in the food and nutrition security. Mr. Anand ji, I will also request you if you could also speak a bit more on what could be the short-term goals of technological advancement so as to ensure some sort of disaster risk reduction or some sort of disaster preparedness in the food and nutrition security.
Okay, thank you so much and good morning to all of you. How much time do I have at my disposal? How much time do I have at my disposal?
Sir, you have 10 minutes to speak on
Okay, 10 minutes. Anyway, thank you so much that you have given me a chance to speak on this occasion when you're talking to address the difficult situations and how the technology can play a part, particularly the food items. Here, I'll be discussing more on the horticultural commodities, which encompasses the fruits, vegetables, ornamental spices, plantation crops like coconut and these things. So the technology is playing a big role, as a result of which the production of the horticultural commodities has risen, has surpassed the food grain production. This is primarily the role of the technology and the technology through which we connected ourselves with the farmers, stakeholders, be the FPOs or the self-help groups or women groups or many agencies, those who are directly, indirectly helping farmers in the different agroclimatic zones. So as it is evidence that in the COVID-induced lockdown period also, the agriculture has done so well, and particularly the horticulture sector, in terms of meeting the domestic supply. And before me, there were many speakers. They highlighted the logistics, infrastructure, supply chain improvement, management, coordination, those things. But these are the logistics and infrastructure. You need to move the commodities from the production centers to the consumption centers or the vulnerable societies in the country. But the commodity which is going to be moved from one place to another place is the food items. Is the high, I mean, when you talk of the food items, the cereals, pulses, these are the not highly perishable commodities. But when you talk of the fruits, vegetables, ornamentals, and these things, they play much bigger role in the nutrition and health, raising your immunity, spices. So their movement is much more crucial than these commodities because they are highly perishable. They need to be transported or they need to be freighted in a very limited amount of time so that the benefit of this one goes to the society. So what ICR has been doing is that we have been able to develop the technologies through commodity-based research institutions. We are primarily the technology generators. We research on the technology on the basis of the information which we receive from the different parts of the countries, different agroclimatic zones, and develop the material. Primarily in the past, we've been able to we focus primarily on development of varieties or new planting materials which have a high yielding capacity. They are input responsive, and we did not pay much focus on the nutritive value of these things. But now we have been able to put focus on how to develop a material where the nutritive component is much higher: proteins, vitamins, enzymes, antioxidants. How these things are are present in the commodity that you consume is in higher quantities than in traditional material or traditional varieties. As a result, we've been able to develop more than 50 biofortified material where the protein content has been enhanced. I mean, this is rampant deficiencies have been observed. There are many hotspots, particularly when you talk of the regions, Eastern UP, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, West Bengal, Odisha, and similar states are there in some peninsular states also. So we have been able to develop such material which are really novel, They have protein quantities, vitamins in much higher quantities, and we have developed the adequate mechanisms in different states. Of course, agriculture is a matter of the states. We are working in a partnership with the states. We are working with the different agencies, those who are in the agriculture, horticulture. So there's these technologies when I'm talking, the varieties, the planting material of this one, and a seed either by the traditional way of doing the seed multiplication or by using tissue culture technology. The plants are being produced in larger quantities and it goes to through these agencies in partnership mode also, and also in our individual capacities, because we have 108 research institutions of ICR located in all over India. So these three institutional mode, we are addressing the local needs of the farmers in terms of addressing the problem in the field, and also helping those agencies, those who are engaged in multiplication of the good qualities, healthy planting material of those commodities where, the novel kind of material is available for the cultivation. And not only that, we are also helping them to how to connect with their produce with the market so that the benefit accrues to them, and there is a win-win scenario for each and every one of them. I don't know, in addition to this, how we can be helpful, but as regard to technology, we are always ready. And in the event of need, we can also join hand with any agencies, or if we have prepared, somebody was talking of the preparation of the hotspot maps also. If you know such areas where this kind of need is there, where intervention of this with the high quality seed planting material is there, we can address those locations also. With this, I think my time is over, and I will be available at your disposal for any technical backup for any part of the country from the horticulture or agriculture point of view, to play our roles in capacities which is befitting to us. Thank you so much for giving me a chance here today. And I would like to request you that I have another meeting lined up next in the next 30 minutes. So I have to go from the meeting from here. So please forgive me that I'll be leaving this meeting just now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Singh, for those very valuable inputs. I think you've emphasized the importance of developing nutrition-rich foods. And as we are aware that when responding to emergencies, the concerns of people who lack the necessary nutrition does go for a toss. I think your development and your research in this field is certainly very important. Secondly, you've also explained the need to develop more resistant food, and I think climate change is a very core concern of disaster management humanitarian professionals, and so ensuring that the food crops and the fruit crops that you're growing are climate change resistant will definitely go a long way in ensuring food security in the times to come. So I think the Department of Horticulture does have a very significant role to play in disaster risk reduction, and we thank you once again for your comments. Very valuable inputs.
It wasn't possible to cover all those points.
I can understand, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. We will now move on to Ms. Suchi Sehgal, who is from the Department of ICDS, Government of NCT Delhi. Before we move on to Ms. Suchi, may I kindly request the audience members here to verify your name in the right-hand side column to ensure that the correct name is displayed. I will now request Ms. Suchi Sehgal, who is the Deputy Director ICDS in the Government of NCT Delhi, to take over. Just to provide a brief introduction of Ms. Suchi, she has been nominated by our eminent panelist, Ms. Rashmi, who heads the department in Government of Delhi. Ms. Suchi, I will hand over to you and request you to take the floor. Ms. Sehgal, am I audible? Your mic and your video is switched off. Ms. Sehgal, if I'm audible to you, we kindly request you to take the floor. Okay, I think we've just received a message saying she's facing some technical issues. Notwithstanding, we'll ask her to express her comments after the next speaker. I now take this opportunity to invite Mr. Abner Daniel, who is a food and nutrition specialist from UNICEF India. Mr. Abner is part of the Food and Nutrition Security Sector Committee of Sphere India and has been playing a very active role in developing the handbook and providing his comments on the same. He has been associated with UNICEF over the last 15 years, and his expertise is in the field of child development and nutrition. He has been a health officer in Uttar Pradesh and a RHC consultant for the last 3 years. Prior to this, he has also worked in World Health Organization, and he has exemplary knowledge in the field of community health and preventive medicine. Mr. Abner Daniel, will hand it over to you so that you can address the audience and speak on the issue of streamlining benchmarks and standards in FNS in food and nutrition security. Mr. Abner Daniel, over to you.
Thanks so much, Paritosh. And let me begin by thanking NIDM and Sphere India for hosting this very important consultation and giving me the opportunity of addressing the gathering. So utilizing this opportunity, I would like to make 3 broad points in the next 7 to 8 minutes around the issue of food and nutrition security coordination as part of emergency response. So the first point I would like to highlight is the fact that we have been focusing and talking a lot about food security, and we seem to have not discussed a lot about the fact that security alone may not be sufficient for achieving nutrition security. So it is one part is about ensuring that the right nutrients reach the affected populations, but also important to ensure that these nutrients reach the right people as per their requirements. And not only that, these nutrients are able to play a role that they are for in the bodies of the affected populations. And this that the families are able to retain these nutrients in the body. They are able to have appropriate practices, especially for the most vulnerable segments of the patient, which are pregnant, lacting women, and young children. Efforts to ensure nutrition security go much beyond what we need to do for food security, which itself is a huge challenge as we have seen based on comments by the earlier speakers. So here I would just like to highlight that for ensuring nutrition security, there are huge opportunities that exist through our multi-sectoral program approaches that are currently designed within the Government of India programs to deliver these. And those kind of frameworks and platforms for delivering nutrition services can be leveraged when we are talking about an appropriate food nutrition security response as part of emergencies and disasters. The second point I'd like to highlight, and this was at least partly covered by some of the earlier speakers, that India is blessed with a huge, tremendous profile of our service delivery platforms and programs. And clearly, the food nutrition security response has to fully align with these Government of India programs. So we clearly heard that MDM should be one of the main platforms for delivering food to affected populations. And similarly, various platforms such as the ICDS, the Ministry of Health, Health Wellness Centers under the Ayushman Bharat, or for example, even the various ambitious schemes such as the Poshan Abhiyan, which talks about multi-sectoral convergence for addressing nutrition. So these clearly are important platforms, and the food nutrition security response during disasters has to be planned and delivered from using the existing platforms of Poshan Abhiyan and such other platforms of Government of India. Now coming to the specific issues about benchmarks and standards. So it's very clear that this is extremely important. Whenever we undertake a journey, we always need to know where we have to reach even before we begin. And we also need to know where are the different milestones where we have to cross in our journey to reach the final outcome. So clearly these benchmarks and standards would guide us in this process. And I know that the draft handbook currently has suggested indicators that we can use to set these benchmarks and standards. But again, here would like to highlight as my final point is that these indicators need to also be closely aligned with the Government of India programs. So clearly we have the ICDS CAS as one example. The health system has the health management information system, which does capture many of the nutrition related indicators in their existing government programs. So these can be optimally leveraged to ensure that the reporting during disasters is also streamlined with the existing program commitments. So we will naturally be able to have a continuous connect between our humanitarian responses as well as our development programs in the short, medium, and long term. So these were the key important points I wanted to make, and thank you so much for this opportunity. I look forward to working closely with the Sphere India team, with NIDM and others to ensure that our food nutrition security response is comprehensive and it is able to address the needs of the affected communities to the fullest extent. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Daniel. That was, I think, a wonderful uh, explanation of how it is that we can leverage the existing systems that are already out there instead of going about duplicating efforts and creating new other concurrent systems. I think you've highlighted very well that how the existing networks of the MDM or the ICDS through our Anganwadi workers, through our PDA systems can be, further strengthened by civil society, and perhaps civil society can work closely to supplement government's efforts. I think we will, moving on, we will definitely reflect on the existing government standards to ensure that the same are reflected in the handbook, and wherever standards could be improved, we will coordinate and request government agencies and have discussions with them so as to ensure that the standards that government has implemented are enhanced. Thank you, Dr. Anil, once again for your really insightful comments. I take this opportunity to invite Mrs. Sehgal to speak upon the experience of Delhi government and especially the ICDS department in responding to COVID-19. I believe we have a lot to learn from their experience so as to see how coordination can be improved during emergencies. But Mrs. Sehgal, I hand it over to you, and thank you once again for joining this panel discussion.
Thank you, Paritosh, for inviting us here on this platform. I would like to inform all the participants that in government, in ICDS, running the ICDS, reaching out to all the beneficiaries had been a great challenge for us during the COVID times. And especially in Delhi, where there were more than 1,000 containment zones, and most of our beneficiaries, they were staying in the affected areas, difficult to reach. But through coordination, through the motivation of our grassroots workers, and all the stakeholders, we could achieve reaching out to every beneficiaries. That is more than 6,000, children 0 to 6 years, pregnant and lactating women. We could deliver them the take-home ration at their grassroots level. We had changed our system. Prior to lockdown, we were giving, a hot cooked meal and all in the Anganwadi. It was like a mini play school. I think all participants know about the ICDS Anganwadi system. But we had to change the system of supply. We converted into a take-home thing and to deliver them at the doorstep. Then there were challenges regarding, the migrant laborers who had come back to their back to Delhi from then enrolling them, putting them back into the system, providing them with all health facilities and food ration. That was also challenging. The Delhi, our workers, the health workers, all were on their toes throughout the COVID times. So this is one thing I want to share. Then the food security response from the public has been good. We have been able to, increase our clientele during that period because there were many people who were not, asking for food before, the lockdown, but now we have more enrollment. We're still continuing with the system, and the challenges in the containment areas I've already discussed. That's all I have to share from the ICDS Delhi. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Segar. I think you have really explained to us your experience in dealing with a situation that was not previously explained. I think Delhi is not a very high risk zone, although the northern part of the city does face floods at regular intervals. Delhi was especially an area that it is not very susceptible to disasters as such. But notwithstanding, I think you've explained to us how your workers, the health workers in Delhi, have risen to the occasion and ensured food and nutrition reaches the beneficiaries. At the same time, we've explained the unprecedented crisis that migrant workers face, especially in the region of NCR Delhi, NCT Delhi. And I think it's great to see that these people are now beneficiaries of government food safety nets. Thank you, Mrs. Sehgal, once again for sharing your experience of dealing with emergency, especially the COVID-19 one in Delhi. I thank you once again. I take this opportunity now to welcome Ms. Pratnya Paitankar from the World Food Programme to speak a bit on mainstreaming DRR, mainstreaming disaster risk resilience in food and nutrition security sector. Ms. Paitankar is the SDG manager and the program officer monitoring and evaluation of United Nations World Food Programme for the last 16 years. She has expertise in capacity building, qualitative research, and corporate communications. Prior to this, she has also been the program officer at the National AIDS Control Organization and was the regional manager at CARE Foundation. Ms. Paitankar, it is my pleasure to invite you on this panel discussion, and I hand over the floor to you to speak on mainstreaming DRR in FMS. Pratnya?
Paritosh, Pradanya may be on another call. She messaged me. So I suggest you go for the next speaker and we will try her at the end here.
Sure. Thanks, Vikrant, for the input. I think we are all impatiently waiting for Dr. Sujit Ranjan, the Director of Coalition for Food and Nutrition Security, to express his thoughts and his views on how it is that we can achieve FNS standards during emergency response. To give a brief introduction of Dr. Ranjan, he is the Executive Director of the Coalition for Food and Nutrition Security. He has been associated with the social development sector for more than 2 decades. His experience includes leading and managing large-scale programs, policy advocacy, and partnership management. Prior to the coalition, he was working as the Chief Operating Officer of the Piramal Swasthya Management and Research Institute. He has also worked as a Director of CARE India and the Chief Operating Officer of Magic Bus India Foundation. Dr. Sujit Ranjan has worked extensively with leaders in national and state governments, with civil society organizations, the private sector, and the development agencies. It is a pleasure to have him work as and co-lead the Food and Nutrition Security Sector Committee of Sphere India, and it is an immense pleasure for me to hand over the floor to him. Dr. Ranjan, over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Paritosh, and thank you very much, Sphere India and National Disaster Management for giving me this opportunity to be here. And I'm very happy to share one small presentation. And this presentation is primarily based on the discussion coalition had with civil society organizations, government, our central and state government representatives, because I'm representing the largest coalition in the country, which talks about the food and nutrition security. And this coalition, based on the discussion we had, like how we are, how we can achieve the food and security during disaster, during any kind of emergency. And so it's important to understand the background, and we know this fact very well that in our country, the 1/4 of Indian children are born with low birth weight, and 35.7% children, that's the under 5, are underweight, and 38.4 are stunted, that's the Bonapan, Thignapan, and the 21% vested, that's the Dublapan, and over 58% children are anemic. So, again, we know this fact very well that so far as the recommended diet is concerned, it's only out of 3, only 2 children are getting the same. And so in India, every second child is affected by some sort of malnutrition. and pre-diabetic also is an issue. So how that can be taken care of properly during any kind of emergency by all the civil society organizations as well as national and state authorities. So we know this fact very well. Again, this is based on our assessment that mostly during COVID also we felt that nutrition was not properly taken during the food and nutrition security during in disaster, and the normal food that's the care for the children also we were providing the same for the children, and by knowing this fact very well that malnutrition and micronutrient deficiencies are very different. So the children need a different kind of support, different kind of food, and children cannot wait. So it's important how to take good care of them. And we also know this fact very well that the nutritional problem, especially like how the storage, how the handling of the things can be taken in a very proper manner during the emergency. Then we also discussed and we also felt that most of the food and nutrition support which we are providing during the emergency is for saving the life and how to prevent the mass migration. But the most important, how the health and nutritional status of the most vulnerable group, that's the children below 5 years, 2 years, and the pregnant lactating mothers, they are the most vulnerable group, and how we can take good care of them. We also felt that it's important for the authorities as well as the civil society organization, how the coordination can be ensured in such a manner so that the knowledge of the nutritional requirements can be very clear down the line, maybe at all level, how the clarity is there with regard to food need, the family, how we can understand the families during that geography and the population, and how the same can be monitored, especially the nutrient intake, and the supply side, the procurement side can be ensured. Because we know this fact very well, infant and young child, that's a very crucial phase, and often dramatically increase during their malnutrition. Child mortality and morbidity can increase during the emergency. The breastfeeding, again, it's a kind of how the counseling, the support can be provided to the right kind of knowledge can be provided to the mothers and the family. And the complementary feeding, that's the very crucial phase, and all of us are fighting here in the country with the undernourished children. So during emergency, how that can be taken care of, because the food which we are providing, mostly like food is very difficult to prepare into the soft or semi-solid food. And pregnant lactating mothers, as I mentioned, the different kind of nutritional need and how that can be ensured. So in our coalition, we had series of consultations, series of discussion on this, and we have I have just jotted down some of the discussion points. How the national policy on the mainstreaming of 1,000 days can be ensured. How the 1,000 days, that's very crucial for any baby for his or her nutritional status and the entire life, so far as the mental status, mental development is concerned, social and emotional development is concerned. That's very important. And set up the target group, set the state level targets like sustainable food and nutrition security and the result based monitoring part. Then we also discussed and we have recommended that a special impact on action research projects. So the high burden malnutrition districts, like our aspirational district is there, and among even the aspirational districts, how many districts are flood prone or the emergency disaster prone districts, and how that can be identified, and we can target those districts so that we can get the best even during the emergency from there. And we discussed, Sinha sir was talking about the collaboration. It's very important that to understand to identify the disaster hotspots and the collaboration between the various departments can be ensured, but primarily the Ministry of WCD, Tribal Welfare can play a very important role to ensure this. Then the revised, we also felt that the update and revised global sphere standards, how that can be ensured, and the nutrition security can be taken care of in a very strategic manner into that, along with the monitoring mechanism. Then we also understand that infant and young child feeding is very crucial, and that's the crucial for the our children and the 1,000 days which I'm mentioning here. How that can be ensured, the IYCF can be taken care of in a very strategic manner during the emergency response. Like the coalition has also discussed and jotted down these points as a kind of recommendation and shared that the food and nutrition security in disaster emergency with the technical support of NDMA and the state disaster, it's important to identify the nodal officer there. It's important to identify the specific need which are needed for that nodal officer to collaborate with the other departments and the civil society organizations. And to bring the comprehensive National Food and Security Act for disaster management and the policy for clear provision of ban any kind of experimentation. That is very, very common, especially for the food and nutrition security, like the milk powder and the feeding bottles, infant foods. All those things we have observed, and we have taken a very strong stand against those things. So it's important to have the clear-cut regulation and the commit increase of the financial resources for the nutritional action, especially creating the budget line for the nutritional components and the nutritional efforts which are needed during the emergency. Making the policy change in line of the Manrega, already coalition is taking a very strongly this component, how the Nutri Garden and how the Manrega can be linked with that, so that the food security and the nutrition security and the food safety also can be ensured even during the emergency. Some of the program delivery recommendations which I would like to share: how to respect the human dignity during the emergency, especially with regard to the food safety standards, and the capabilities and capacities of the frontline workers, civil society organization, how that can be ensured to catalyze the action and the multi-stakeholders partnership. And that is already there, how it's important to channelize, mobilize in such a manner. Then we also recommended a manual like food and nutrition security materials. What are the actions are needed? What kind of the HR plan is required, so that we can reach to the our victims, emergency victims on time and provide the right kind of support. And to strengthen nutrition sensitive food value chain, including introduction of silo storage, grain bank, and the food safety, how that can be ensured even during the emergency. Some of the important priorities, like I have already mentioned, the early and exclusive breastfeeding is very crucial. Maternal nutrition during the emergency program, and along with IYCF, focus on IFA consumption during that, because that's the crucial phase. And again, the timely introduction of the safe nutrition and complementary feeding. Then feeding for children during and after illness, even during the emergency and affected malnutrition. There are a huge number of severely acute malnourished children or acute malnourished children are with us. That's the largest number in the world. So how we can have a very clear-cut strategy for them during that period, and the immunization and the behavior change communication. So I was also suggesting, like this is the time when the national and the district authorities, already that the forum is there. So it's important ICDS, Department of Health and Family Welfare, and the agencies, civil society organizations, how they can plan in such a manner so that these nutrition component can be taken in a very strong manner. some of the challenges we can understand that that is also I would like to share, like food basket, which has been observed during, maybe because of the financial issues, the food basket, the challenge to improve the food basket of the target population, that was also observed, and the designing the food ration to improve the nutritional value, and what is needed and what is available, there is always a mismatch. So by this way we can address such kind of challenges, and effective coordination into the intervention cluster, like the food and the public health, a special social protection camp management that can be ensured if such kind of policy recommendation and the program delivery which I mentioned earlier. And by this way we will be in a position to reach to our target population and ensure the human dignity, and especially the nutrition component in a country like India, where already we are facing double burden, like existing undernutrition and the undernutrition because of the emergency like this COVID. We are facing the dual burden. So that can be managed, that can be ensured, that can be taken care of in a more professional manner by this way, if the things are already there in our policy, and the capacity is also we can ensure by this interdepartmental coordination and the convergence. Thank you very much, and I'm available here, and coalition is always ready to take this agenda forward with the help of all civil society organizations and our state and national government. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ranjan, for that really brilliant presentation. I think you've covered a lot of points that somehow tend to get a bit ignored. I think you've started by elaborating a bit more on how FNS interventions do focus on saving lives during emergencies, but in the process, the nutrition of the beneficiaries tends to be on a back foot. I think moving forward, that should definitely be something that should be focused upon. You've reinstated and you've reiterated the importance of saving and ensuring that the food and nutrition interventions reach the most vulnerable sections of the society. I think that forms a very core principle of humanitarian interventions, especially leaving no one behind. And unless and until we reach the very last individual who's facing the consequences of a disaster, I think our job is not yet complete. Thank you for elaborating on that as well. You've expressed the importance of undertaking disaster mapping so as to ensure that there is preparedness for any future emergencies. Disaster mapping should be undertaken to ensure that we know the demographic of an area so that pre-positioning of stocks or the interventions can take that sort of nature. And I think that's completely important, and that's perhaps preparedness is not necessarily a focus of any humanitarian agencies. We tend to come in rather after the disaster has happened. So thank you for elaborating on that as well. You have focused a lot on ensuring streamlining of coordination activities, because as Mr. Sinha also elaborated before, there are at least 15 to 16 odd departments, ministries looking after food and nutrition. And therefore, if things are not streamlined, if the government nodal officers are not trained and their capacity is not built, there will stand to be a lot of miscommunication and miscoordination, which will affect food and nutrition-based interventions. Along with ensuring mainstreaming DRR in the various laws and policies, you have also expressed the need to have a specific food and nutrition security based laws to for emergency preparedness and for disaster management. I think that's something that definitely needs to be given a thought at. We thank you again for expressing and showing your presentation, and we are very sure, and we've got requests from participants asking for the presentation should be shared. So we'll be more than happy to have it, Dr.
I'll be very happy to share, and this is the presentation of all the, this is not only my presentation, this has been prepared by all the civil society organizations and the government representatives. So I'll be very happy to share among all of you, and I'm forwarding it to you, Paritosh. You can share with everyone.
Definitely, Dr. Sujay, we'll do that. I think we've heard from a brilliant panel of experts and of professionals who've worked on food and nutrition over the last 2 hours. I think this has provided us quite some food for thought, and I believe that participants here do have certain questions that they would like to ask. I think for those who would like to ask any questions, I'll request you to put them in the chat box, in the Zoom chat, and if you want to address it to any particular individual, please also do mention that, and we will take it forward and ask our panelists here. Let me just. we've received a request from Professor Dr. Jyoti Ranjan Mohanty. She has asked if any of the speakers could throw some light on how ICT tools can be used for coordinating and ensuring food and nutrition security for the marginalized sections of the society, especially how it is that the ICT tools can be used for the remote cutoff areas of population. And especially when it comes to disaster, these people stand to be the most affected. So how it is that ICT can be used? Would any of the panelists like to respond?
Paritosh, Pradnya here. So
Hi.
I think in my presentation, I can do that. So can I make a presentation right now?
Please, Pradnya. Yeah, sorry, we didn't see your name. I think your name is changed to Vikrant Mahajan. Yeah, you've changed it again.
Is it?
So, yeah. Thank you for being in this presentation. Just to give a brief introduction of Ms. Pradnya Paitankar, she is the SDG Manager and the Program Officer, Monitoring and Evaluation at the United Nations World Food Program for the past 11 years. Along with Dr. Sujit Ranjan, Pradnya leads the Food and Nutrition Security Sector Committee in Sphere India, and she has been leveraging her expertise in capacity building, qualitative research, and corporate communications for this. Prior to this, she was a program officer at the National AIDS Control Organization and regional manager at CARE Foundation. Ms. Pradnya Paitankar will now go on to elaborate a bit more on how mainstreaming can be done for the food and nutrition security sector. Pradnya, I hand it over to you, and thank you once again for taking the time out.
Right, thank you so much. And I'm sorry, actually, I had to go out for some immediate work. So in fact, a lot actually has been said about it. So my presentation would be more of like bringing all these threads together. And as Sujit in his elaborate presentation has said that while leading this entire process of creating this whole the multi-sector coordination book, I think it was a wonderful experience as well. And I think, this is the best time to really work together on the food security nutrition mainstreaming in DRR. So without taking any further time, I'll just want to highlight a few points, which to an extent said a few times, but maybe need some highlighting. So first thing is that the disaster, they actually impact the food and nutrition security and all aspects of it. So it is like not just the providing food will help, but it is like the food availability, access, utilization, looking at the data and the sustainability, and also to an extent the stability. So from that perspective, if we talk about disaster impact on food and nutrition security, it is not just the nutrition, it is not just the food, it is not just the agriculture sector, but the whole gamut of the food and nutrition security, which includes the livestock, which includes the overall food livelihoods lost, incomes lost, seasonal shortfalls, the trend analysis, what is the extent the people have food with them, and to what extent the social safety nets actually respond and are adequate. What is the utilization patterns? Again, looking at the nutrition as a very important aspect. Looking at also, the allied sectors such as water, sanitation, and other aspects of it. So it's actually important to look at disaster impact of on the food security from all its dimension and not just one dimension. That is one point I want to highlight. The second thing, when we talk about mainstreaming food and nutrition security and disaster, and somebody highlighted that putting community at the center is something which is extremely important. And when we are talking about mainstreaming food and nutrition security in the disaster, it is very important that, again, it covers all aspects and all phases of disaster. So in the assessment, so we do JRNA, we do PDNA, we do 24-hour immediate assessment, 72-hour assessment for designing relief response and recovery and preparedness. But it is extremely important to ensure that all these dimensions of food and nutrition security are incorporated into the assessment, so that what we actually try to respond is adhering to those standards and all those aspects of food security, all the dimensions which we talked in the previous slide. Also, I mean, we need to look at what are the global best practices, what are the global standards, what are the country specific best practices. I mean, there are some very good practices which actually exist within country, like the community level grain banks, storing the food in some forms, ensure nutrition through various available commodities and all. So it's very important to really look at and document these global experiences and country best practices and mainstream and incorporate those into our programming, not just by the government, but also by the civil society and whosoever is actually working in the nutrition and food security sector. And one most important thing is also addressing the elements of gender protection and communication, how you really communicate to the community that what are their entitlements, where they should go. And when we talk about disasters, these are like all kinds of disaster, may it be floods, droughts, earthquakes, or I mean, whatever, and the pandemics that we are now. And specifically, I would say that this COVID pandemic has underscored the importance of working on food and nutrition security like never before. Now I'm talking about actually reversing the coin a bit. So mainstreaming DRR in food and nutrition security. And we heard in the first part of our discussions that we have a very strong framework for our institutional framework for food security and nutrition in the country. We have this safety nets, we have the supply chain, and we have surplus of food. However, we also have a reality and a paradox that we do have, or we do actually carry more than 1/4 of the burden of hunger as well as malnutrition in the country. So the most important thing is that when we talk about disaster, whatever efforts which actually the government is doing through through Poshan Abhiyan or other aspects, they actually just have a potential to get completely washed away. And so it is very important, and we have been talking and we have been hearing Abner as well pointing out the safety nets. So how the safety nets become disaster responsive, the experiences in recent times. So we have heard from Mr. Jagannathan how PDS has responded. We talked about pre-positioning. So there are certain things which actually are already there, but what are they sufficient? Are they adequate? And are they really responsive to the increasing needs? So for example, if in a particular disaster, if PDS immediately brings the commodity, does it really reach all those who are affected? Or it just reaches the people who have ration card? So these are some of the questions which actually we need to look at and see and solve while going forward when we talk about making these social safety nets disaster responsive. The second point is how to address the inclusion and inequalities, reaching the most vulnerable population, community participation, how we are going to ensure that. I'm sure, Sujit, I didn't hear his presentation fully, but when we talk about specific disasters, there would be specific vulnerable population who will be most vulnerable, how to reach those, I mean, the migrants in this particular case of COVID, the women, the children, and how we actually ensure that there is inclusion and inequalities are addressed through the approaches, may it be through government programming or may it be through the civil society programming, and how do we provide the opportunities to everybody so that no one is left behind. Then the second important issue is how to address the issues around the actual food provisioning, the considerations of nutrition, etc., and child feeding and care practices for pregnant women as well as lactating mothers. So how that can be really ensured during the emergencies, not just through ICDS and MDM, but how the communities actually can be brought together and how we can ensure that the things don't really are missed between various stakeholders. So it is very important that the communities work together with the government, and civil society really facilitates and plays a very critical role. Very important point, which I think Vikrant mentioned, how to create evidence, and that's very important. So after every disaster, we are not sure how far the the community has gone back in terms of nutrition and food security parameters. We say that the gains are actually washed out, but what is the real critical impact on the nutritional status, on the food security status? And that's very important point as well going forward for designing this. And so it's also important to incorporate these aspects in the assessments that we are talking about, and the day-to-day monitoring which actually has to be undertaken. Then how best the response could be to improve effective coordination and ensure standards. I mean, a lot really has been talked about on the coordination and standards. I will not repeat anything, but I feel that if we have the common goal, there is an immense scope of actually working together, building the capacities of not just the national level, but SDMAs and DDMAs is an extremely important aspect, specifically on incorporation of food security and nutrition in its entirety. So just wanted to highlight that, I mean, the present day, we actually seem to be pretty good. We are food secure, that's what we say. At the aggregate level, we have adequate food to feed India's population. And of course, we know the inequalities and the problems in some pockets and all. However, if you look at the climate change as the risk multiplier and increasing intensity and frequency of disasters, the forecasted scenario in 2080 looks something like this, where there is an extreme food scarcity. So we have to be really prepared for these kinds of situations. And I think COVID has been an eye-opener. So I'd like to stop here and thank you for giving this as an opportunity. Specifically, I want to make it a point that yes, technology has a solution which is also growing with time. And it is important to document these kinds of best practices, because at this point in time, the portability, the one ration card, one nation policies, use of biometric to weed out the misuse and all. So all these measures are actually being taken. Even if you see some of the measures which are actually being done for cash transfers, or in fact revamping the system of MDM for delivering the food ration at the home, or giving the cash in lieu of that. Those are examples of use of ICT tool. However, actually there is an immense scope to increase this, and going forward, I think unless that coordination is strong with everybody's inputs, we feel that it's a great opportunity, because at this point in time, all the stakeholders are willing to work together. So let's build on that opportunity and take this forward. Thank you so much. Over to you, Paritosh.
Thank you, Pradnya. Paritosh got dropped. He's just connecting again. Just give a second.
Sorry, yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, I lost connection. Pradnya, I was able to listen to through your entire presentation, and I think you've raised some really valid points in terms of what it is that we can look forward to. Like you suggested that while we are looking at leveraging the existing networks of the government in terms of ensuring food and nutrition security, we should also advocate with the government to ensure that a disaster response aspect is incorporated in all food and nutrition based security nets and any networks that we have. You've also elaborated a lot on the importance of gender protection and inclusion in food and nutrition based interventions. As we know, the vulnerable population already have a disadvantage in ensuring food accessibility and availability of food, especially when we look at emergencies. Women stand to be one of the most vulnerable sections of the society in terms of getting access to food. And these sections should be at the center stage of developing any food and nutrition-based intervention. So thank you for mentioning that. You've also elaborated a lot on the accountability to affected population aspect that is core to any humanitarian intervention. I think we have to understand what are the needs of the people and also ensure that we hold ourselves accountable to these. Evidence-based approach is something that you've stressed upon a lot. We all remember that during the initial stages of COVID-19 pandemic, we were all facing issues in terms of response because there was no data available, there was no information available. And as time went on, the access to information slowly improved, but we were still in the dark for a lot of time. And that's why the response could not be coordinated. That's why the response could not be discussed before, hitting the field whenever we did that. So evidence collection is definitely necessary and stands to be a core component of any humanitarian response. Thank you, Pradnya, once again for that really beautiful presentation, and it has given us some food for thought and definitely has raised some questions in our mind in terms of how it is that we should look at any response to any emergency. I think you also addressed the question that was raised by one of our panelists in terms of access to food to remote and vulnerable population, and thank you for responding to that. We have time for one more question that is coming to us from the panelists, from the audience, and after that we'll come to the conclusion. Again, from Dr. Jyoti Ranjan Mohanty, we have a question which asks, how in the Indian context can affordability and accessibility in response, therefore, how can we ensure accessibility and affordability to food and nutrition-based interventions? Can I request any of the panelists to take up this particular question so that they can respond to it?
So, in fact, Paritosh, that is what I said. I mean, when we are talking about access, and that is the highlight of my presentation as well. So when we are talking about food security, we are not just looking at the availability of food or provisioning of food, but we also see the access, and there are various dimensions of that access in terms of, I think PDS actually solves a lot of issues related to access. However, I'm sorry, I think I was out for a while. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
yes, we can.
So it's basically, I mean, access to markets, how that can be ensured. The second is access to the safety net schemes, where, I mean, maybe ICDS, maybe PDS, maybe MDM, or any other distribution which is actually happening as a part of relief and response. And the third is actually affordability, which is also part of access, I would say. So in that case, I mean, we all know the various forces and the difficulties. The roads might be broken, and also all these things, I mean, we have to look at in a situation when we are in disaster. And the second is as a part of preparedness. So how we can really look at both these aspects and work on preparedness more, so that the access actually is maintained over a period of time, and bringing those kinds of strategies in our institutional framework of the Government of India will ensure that this particular aspect is taken care of well in advance. The second possibility is also, I mean, early warning systems and defining the triggers. So what really triggers to actually expand the existing role of PDS, for example. So if the flood actually affects, at what level the PDS actually expands the beneficiary base. So those are the kinds of things which actually needs further discussions and thinking. So I think this answers that question. Over.
Thank you. Thank you, Pradnya. I think you've elaborated a lot well on how it is that we can ensure accessibility and affordability. You've raised the importance of the markets that are out there, the ICDS program, the various safety nets. Thank you for that. I think we've come to a conclusion of the food and nutrition security sector consultation at this point of stage. I would like to really thank the wonderful panelists that we've had today. They have made brilliant presentations, and they will be uploaded on the Sphere India website for those who would like to consult it. I take this opportunity to thank Mr. Anil Sinhaji, who had wonderfully moderated the previous first half of the inaugural session and had made brilliant comments and remarks based on his really rich experience in disaster management across India. We also take this opportunity to thank Mr. Bishu Paranjali, who elaborated on his experience, on his global experience of food and nutrition security, and as his role in the World Food Programme. We also thank S. Jagannathan ji, who had wonderfully taken the time out of his busy schedule and speak about the importance of PDS in the PDS in emergencies. We also thank Mr. Vikrant Mahajan for his vision and for his guidance in terms of moving forward and ensuring future sector consultations on this. I also thank Mr. Dr. Anand Kumar Singh ji from the Department of Horticulture for his very wonderful remarks on how technology can be a useful tool to ensure food and nutrition security and disaster risk reduction. I also thank Mrs. Suchi Sehgal ji, who spoke about her experience of working in disaster, especially in COVID-19, and the response that the ICDS team in Delhi government had taken to this. I thank Dr. Abner Daniel for his wonderful remarks on standards and benchmarks on how we can improve further the handbook by working closely with government approved standards and strengthening them. I thank Dr. Sujit Ranjan ji for his wonderful presentation on a variety of issues and in terms of the policy aspects that could be taken forward to ensure food and nutrition security. And lastly, I take this opportunity to thank Pradnya Vaithankar ji for her wonderful presentation, or what could be the challenges and what could be the ways in which DRR can be mainstreamed in food and nutrition security consultation. Moving forward, this stands to be just one of the first sector consultations that we will have on this issue. We definitely intend to work closely with government departments and the various state government units to understand a bit more on how civil society can contribute to their various and wonderful ambitions and plans that they have. And we definitely stand to leverage the expertise that we have within the civil society to move forward. At this point of stage, I will also request you to look at the chat box wherein we have shared a Google form with you, asking you to have a look at the handbook of food and nutrition security and provide your feedback by undertaking and by filling out the Google form, so that we can collate your inputs, your wonderful comments, and we can work further on strengthening the handbook. We thank everyone once again, all the panelists and all the participants in this session for this brilliant discussion. I hand over now to Michelle for the various other instructions regarding participants and the certificates. And I thank you once again, everyone. Thank you. Michelle, over to you.
Thank you, Paritosh. I would like to make a few administrative announcements before we end the session. For any inputs or suggestions, please do fill the feedback form, and for a certificate of participation, please visit our website, COVID Academy. Your certificates will be ready in 24 hours. If you are having any trouble accessing the certificates, please write to us at covid19academy@sphereindia.org.in. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.